Everyone, thought I would show a quick edit since we haven't had one in a while. This is an image that we took not that long ago at this beautiful mama in this beautiful location, but I knew once I took this that it's still a little bit on the dull side for me, but I knew I could bring some life to it in post. So I'm just going to kind of walk through this and take you through it as I edit this. I've already done a little bit of editing as far as skin, and I've kind of warmed up the whole image just a little. Now, what's kind of bugging me is that she's kind of on a hill, so I'm going to go into my filters and I'm going to liquefy her dress just a little so that she looks a little more even. I'm just kind of bringing her dress down to kind of help even out the horizon, even though it's not even, she is on a heel. I'm just going to kind of make it look like she's not. Okay, so that kind of helps even it out just a little bit. So now what I want to do is I want to kind of add some more interest to the sky. The background is kind of distracting. I want her to pop a little more. So the first thing I'm going to do, so I need to zoom in, not out. I'm going to come up here to my quick selection tool, and I am just going to select her. So I'm not being super careful because I'm going to go in a minute and refine my edge. So once I have her selected, if you make a mistake, just hold down the Alt and go over where you want it to take away. All right, so once I've done that, I'm going to come up to select and mask. And then I'm going to zoom in mainly on her. I do this mainly for hair. You could do it over their whole body, but I found that that's really not too necessary. I'm going to use this little brush in a comet thing. I don't even know what it's called. And I'm just going to kind of go around the edges of her hair. And you can tell it's kind of helping to select those hairs out. I'm going to do it a couple of times just to make sure I get what I want. And then if you mess up, you can come up here to this little one and paint back on. Nope, nope, wrong one, sorry. Okay, so this isn't perfect, but it's going to work for what we need it to work for. Now down here you have an option. You can kind of shift. I usually bring my edges in just a little, somewhere around 10. You can add a little contrast. You can play with this to kind of make it better if you want. I would just kind of shift my edge in a little. Down here on your output too, you want to make sure that you output this to a new layer and then click OK. And what that does is it puts her on a layer by herself. Now it automatically turns off the layer under it, so just make sure you turn that one back on. And then I usually go down to my bottom background layer and create a couple of duplicates. Alright, so now I am going to select out kind of this background. So where it would naturally kind of be blurry, I'm not going to select these bushes because you can tell that they're a different depth of field than what's behind it. So I'm just going to start there and kind of go around those. And then I'll select the rest of that. All right, so once I do that, I'm going to double click and feather that out to about 250. And then I'm going to duplicate just that portion. So just Command or Control J, and I have just that portion that I have selected. Now I want to make sure, because I'm going to make this blurry, I want to take her out of it because right now she's still on this layer, this bottom layer right here. And if I were to blur it out, it would leave a halo around her. So what I want to do is I want to hold down Command or Control, and I want to click on the layer that she is on. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us some marching ants around her. Then I want to make sure that this layer where I want her erased, I make sure it is selected and just delete. So what that's done is it has taken her off of this layer. So if I go in and hide everything, this is what this layer looks like. And this is the area that we're going to be kind of manipulating a little bit. So I'm going to turn all these back on, making sure that I'm working on this layer. I'm going to come up and I'm going to do a blur. So there's lots of different ways I've seen people use a tilt shift blur. There's lots of different ways you can do this. This is what works for me. I'm playing around with learning some different ways, but for now we're just going to go to Gaussian blur. Now you obviously don't want to take it up too high because that looks really fake, but I usually take it up to kind of see what's going to be blurred. Now it's a little bit around her. I want it a little bit blurrier, but I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. Now for this, I usually go somewhere between 10 and 20. Again, we don't want it to look too super fake. And actually, I'm going to take this to about 10 maybe. I'm going to leave it on the lower side. Right about there is good. All right, so once I have that blurred where I want it, I can click OK. And so you can see that that's just kind of blurred that background. It's kind of a cheat if you don't have a really great lens. This is a great cheat for getting that compression that some of the better lenses give you. All right, so I want her to stand out more. This area right here is kind of bugging me where you can see the sky through there. So I'm just going to make sure again that I'm on this layer, and I'm just going to use my clone stamp. It doesn't matter if I go on top of her because again, I have a copy of her. It's obviously taking it out here, but right here it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to kind of work around her, make sure there's anything that I want to make sure is kind of taken away, again, because we want her to pop and stand out of the environment. Okay, so we've just kind of gone from there to there just to help her stand out more. All right, once I have that done, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to merge this layer, these two layers, so that everything is together again. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to, so I'm going to come over here to a gradient, no, not a pattern, a gradient, and I want to change this to a radial. Excuse me. And this is going to be where I kind of place my fake sun. It was kind of an overcast day, so we didn't have a lot of sun, but we're going to make a sun. So we're going to stick it right about here in this tree line. You double click there, you can go in and change the color. So I want this to be the center, and it's going to be a brighter yellow, somewhere in there. Now back here, I want it to change this to an orange color. All right, so now you can kind of tell where it's going to be. You can, again, change it around if you want to. I want to bring a little more orange into this, so I'm just going to take this center point right here and I'm going to drag it over a little bit. And then drop another little square for this for the orange. Okay, so now once we have this, I can change the scale of it if I want to. I can make it bigger or smaller. I think right about there is good for us. Click OK. And now I'm going to change my blend mode. I typically go towards overlay, but if you wanted to, you could play around with it, see what some of the others are. Linear light really is a little too bright for me. I usually stick somewhere between overlay a vivid light or an overlay. I think for this one, I kind of like the vivid light. Kind of helps pop a little bit more, but I am going to drop my opacity down some. All right, so there we go. We've kind of added a light source. All right, so now I'm going to merge that again, and because now I have this is a little bit warm, I want to add some of that warmth to the rest of the image, so I've just made a blank layer. And I'm going to come in here to kind of an orangey yellow. I'm going to keep it more on the orange side, I think. Again, change my blending mode to overlay. And then with a big soft brush, and I'm at 23% opacity, I'm just going to leave it there for now. And I'm just going to kind of paint on, again, it doesn't matter if I go over her because she's not being affected right now. And I'm just going to kind of paint in, and I'm going to change up my, my color some. This is a great way to kind of add some light and some light pops. The lighter the color, the brighter and more noticeable it's going to be. If you use a darker color like black, you kind of paint in some of the shadows and it will darken up for you. So that's just a little trick on adding light and shadows with color. Alright, so once I've gotten it there, you can tell we've kind of changed up a little. Again, if you wanted to make it a little more, you could just duplicate that layer. Let me duplicate it, but then drop this top layer. And then merge those together. And then if you wanted to, you could play around with the opacity just to kind of see, like right about there. Alright, so once I've had that, I'm going to merge it. Now I want to add a little more interest in the sky. Now there are tons of ways you can do a sky overlay. This is just kind of my way of doing it. There are also tons of sky overlays you can purchase, and I do suggest doing that, but this is just a way you can do it if you don't currently have any. Just Google search some images. Now I do have a sun in my light source, so I'm looking for something, like I'm kind of leaning towards this. I want something that is on the yellow side. If I dropped in a blue sky, that obviously wouldn't match my lighting in it. So I'm kind of looking for a sun, a sky that has a sun. You can even come up here, and because I know I have some yellow, I could Google yellow sunset. And you can see I've done that before. I want to see that. I'm kind of leaning towards this one. Alright, so once I have the image that I want to use, I am just going to right click and copy image. Of course, make sure it's not copyrighted. And then I'm going to paste it into my picture. Now if you hold down Shift, you are going to keep your same scale proportions. However, if you just move it, you can manipulate it to be anywhere you want. Alright, so once I've done that, I am going to kind of come right here. I want to make sure that my sun kind of lines up. And click OK. Now, because I've blurred my background, if I turn this off, you can see the background's really blurry. Well, the sky, if you think about depth of field, the sky is further back than the trees, so it should definitely be blurrier than the trees. So I'm going to come up and I'm going to blur that. And I usually blur this out pretty good, somewhere between 30, 20 and 35, 45, whatever you need to do depending on the image that you pop in. Alright, so once I've blurred it, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to change my blending mode to multiply, and you can see that's just kind of popped in a little bit of sky. We do have this line right here, so what we can do here is add a layer mask, and then paint on with I usually start at about 50% opacity, and we can just kind of paint that off. where we don't want it. Just to kind of help blend it in a little bit more. All right. So it's a subtle change, but you can see it does add a little bit of interest. It helps our model pop out a little bit more, but we're not quite finished yet. I want to go in and I want to kind of brighten this up, add a little bit of color pop. So again, a blank layer with blending mode of overlay. I'm going to go into my greens and I'm going to use a pretty dark green here. My opacity I'm going to turn down to around 30% and I'm just going to paint on this grass. Again, it doesn't matter if I go over her because she's not on this layer. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to select some yellows, kind of where this, a yellow-orange where this sun might be hitting. And I am just going to add a few pops of color. Let me turn my opacity down just a little. So I'm just adding a few pops of color where the sun again is kind of hitting. All right. Once I've done that, I want to go in with one more. I want to darken up, so I'm going to use kind of a deep red, reddish brown color, and I want to come right here on this ground level. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my lasso tool, and I'm going to kind of select this bottom part. I'm not being real super careful. In fact, it's better if you don't have a straight line. I'm going to feather this out again to around 250. And if I do Command or Control J, it's going to put it on a layer, and I can kind of manipulate that. I'm going to make it a little darker. I want to maybe give it a little bit of a Gaussian blur. I may want to make it a little bit a little red to it. All right, so there we go. So we have gone through and we have manipulated the background, made it where we want it without really touching our subject. If I turn this top layer off, you can see how it has changed her, but because we put her on that layer by herself, it's not going to affect her. So now I'm going to merge those, duplicate my layer, and now because I do want to warm her up a little, I'm going to go in with kind of another yellowy orange, blending mode overlay, and I'm going to do this really at a low level, so I'm going to go around 8. So I'm going to start around her and then just kind of work my way out. If I turn that on and off, you can kind of see we've warmed her up. May drop this down just a tad. All right, so just about finished. I have a few other, I kind of like to mess around with my levels layers just a little bit. I'm definitely kind of more of a darker editor. Of course, you can follow these same steps and kind of be more bright in the area as well. But I'm kind of leaning towards something more like this. So if you see where we started and where we finish, we've really made her kind of stand out a little bit more. We've got a little bit of interest and some color, made those colors pop. So this would be my final edit.